everybody. Welcome to the No Name Music Cast. My name's Tim, and this is
Joy.
And this week, it's Joy's turn to pick the topic. Now, I've been given some homework, so I think I know where this episode is going, but I will let Joy explain what this episode is all about.
Okay, so I gave Tim a list of albums to listen to that were, well, with the exception of maybe one, maybe a little bit more out of the realm of what Tim would normally listen to. I was even shocked when I listened back to some of these because I don't even know that I remembered it. There is a lot of pop music in my genre. There is some kind of punkish. There's a little bit of R&B, so it's a wide variety, but a lot of pop music. I am dying to hear what Tim has to say. And to anyone who follows Tim on Twitter, he was posting different albums recently that he was listening to. And one of our friends and listeners of the show, Jilbo, said, I hope you don't get whiplash for flying into the left, for jumping straight into this new genre, or what was their new decade. So this is a play on, and given I have a feeling Tim has heard a lot of these songs before, he may not be able to identify them as easily as some of his 80s music, but nothing that I sent him was completely obscure. Maybe Bikini Kill was, but outside of that, it was not that obscure. But this should be funny. Tim has wrote down his thoughts, feelings, emotional aspirations about these albums, and I'm going to start it with I gave him Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the album, which was one of the first albums I ever owned. And today, this is the one I think that shocked me the most. So I pulled all of these up and listened to them while I was working today. I forgot how pop this album was. So you have Hey Mr. DJ by Backstreet Boys. You've got Dr. Jones by Aqua. You've got Melissa Joan Hart's own version of One Way or Another. And then my favorite is Slam Dunk the Funk by Five. All right, Tim, what are your thoughts on the Sabrina the Teenage Witch album?
Right. So my first question. So it was hard to find. I pride myself on being able to find almost anything I want off the internet. And I struggled to find this. I found the track listing for it, and then I had to cull all the tracks from YouTube. I even did a Amazon Music trial thing to try and find it, and it is obscure. So if you have a CD of it, that's probably the only time you'd ever actually have this album. So the question I have for you that I couldn't find out when I was researching it as I was listening to it, does this come from Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the TV show, or the movie they made?
It's the TV show. So, and these aren't really necessarily songs that played in the show. Sabrina basically Melissa Joan Hart made an album to put out her own song One Way or Another, because she does a version of One Way or Another on the album. So she kind of tried to step into some type of, so I think these might be songs that have showed up in the TV show in the early 2000s. But really, it was just Melissa Joan Hart picking out 15 tracks or so she liked and throwing her own song on it.
Yeah, it's like when you find these film soundtracks and it says music by and inspired by, or music from and inspired by. So I assumed that these songs were just songs of the day. They were probably on the same label as whoever put this out, and they just picked a lot of songs that was in the same kind of genre. So these are my thoughts on Sabrina the Teenage Witch soundtrack album. So I listened to it on a road trip. That's when I first experienced this collection. And myself and Hannah both came to the conclusion, certainly on the first listen, it was like all the artists, it wasn't their best song, it was like a second-rate song by them. So you have Spice Girls on there. And it's not one of the Spice Girls tracks I would be familiar with. It's not maybe the best Spice Girls track on there. Where are we?
Hey, Mr. DJ, Dr. Jones.
Yeah, Dr. Jones by Aqua. I mean, should Barbie Girl be on there instead?
Absolutely love Dr. Jones, though. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, and that's a song I'd heard before, but in the realm of pop music, it's no Barbie Girl.
Or Kate by Ben Fold 5. That's not one of his most popular songs.
No, but I like that song. That was actually a pretty good song. I
absolutely love that song.
I was pleased to see our friend Norbert No Bacon makes an appearance on this album. Chumbawamba.
And he asks you, do you have memory loss over and over again? And she goes, no, I don't.
But again, it's not tub thumping. And then there's that Cardigan song, blah, 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 blah. Is that actually from Sabrina the Teenage Witch? Because on the YouTube video I found it said theme tune 2.
If it is, it's not like the theme to the TV show. I don't know what it's a theme to.
I don't know, because I've never seen Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the TV show. I know what it is, but I've never, ever seen it.
Well, I've seen every episode, and I can tell you the theme song is mostly just like music, and she's jumping around, changing outfits, and doing weird stuff as a witch. So I don't know what it's... I mean, it could have been in one of the episodes, and I'm not recognizing it, or it was a theme to something else that's not Sabrina. But I mean, to be honest, the blah, blah, blah song, I don't even know if I've heard it outside of this album. And I've heard a lot of the Cardigans.
Yeah, I can tell you a claim to fame. I once stood in a bar in Jönköping, Sweden, and is it Nina or Nana, the singer from the Cardigans? She was in the same bar. We shared the same space.
Did you know it at the time that she was there? Or did you find out like later?
No, I found out after she left. Somebody said, "Oh, did you see blah blah from the Cardigans?" And I was like, "No." She said, "Oh, she drinks in here sometimes." I was like, "Oh, okay."
Oh, okay. You're standing behind her the whole time and didn't even know.
Exactly. But as I look through my extensive notes for this, I will say that Sugar Ray's version of Abracadabra is basically the same as Steve Miller Band's version, but not quite as good.
Yeah, it really is. Well, that's what I was going to say about One Way or Another, Sabrina's version. It's kind of the same, but not quite as good.
Yeah, and when I was looking into this, her version of One Way or Another. See, I didn't know Melissa Joan Hart was the person from Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Again, my wife, who paid a bit more attention to music in the 90s, told that to me when I was on the road trip. But when I was looking into this is the only place that track has ever been published. So if you want that, it's only on this album. And the YouTube video I found for it said this is a super, super rare track.
Yeah, and but what's funny though is because I had this album growing up, that her version of One Way or Another randomly pops up in my head. And what's funny is if you've ever heard Melissa Joan Hart speak, her singing voice, which I have a feeling is heavily dubbed, but her singing voice sounds exactly like the way she speaks. Mm-hmm. Like her speaking voice and her singing voice are almost identical, which really doesn't happen in most people who are singers. And so like I can literally hear her going one way and it sounds exactly like you would think Melissa Joan Hart would sound saying that. Yeah. It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I mean, again, it's not quite as good as the original, but that track gets a free pass for me because she's, from the program, and it probably appeared in an episode. I
think it did. I want to say that it was used. It was in an episode of the show, and it was like her running around, like you would think, like chasing something or something very Scooby Doo kind of farce-like, and that song was playing. I'm pretty sure that's where it comes from.
Exactly. Yeah, I figured that was probably the case. Well, as I said, I like the Ben Folds track, Kate. I thought that was a very good track. But again, it's probably not his finest work.
Yeah, I'm not a super big Ben Folds fan. I mean, besides just like his known music, but I really like Kate. So I can agree with you on that. And it sounds like a song that you'd hear in every early 2000s movie ever, truthfully. So it works for the album.
Exactly. Have you ever heard that his version of Common People he did with William Shatner?
No. Oh, yes. Yes, I have, because you said with William Shatner. I think I've heard it, but I don't remember it too well.
She came from Greece. There was a thirst for knowledge.
Yeah. Now that you said it, I've seen the video, but it's kind of in the back of my mind. It's like a memory. I haven't thought of it in a long time till you said it, Tim. That's funny.
What else is on here? Robin, Show Me Love. Again, I've heard that before. I was playing a lot of gigs in nightclubs around this time. I had a fill-in gig with a Blues Brothers tribute band for a very short period of time when I was unemployed, and I was traveling up and down England in a large transit van doing this Blues Brothers tribute, and we played a lot of like nightclubs, Chicago rock cafes, which is nightclub bar type places, and I remember that song as big playing at the time. There is one act on here which is not. Well, it's fine, pop music, but it's Five, Slam Dunk Da Funk. Now, I don't have too much problem with the track because it's just like a track of the day. And I mean, it's not, it's not like a Stevie Wonder track or something. It's just like disposable pop. But I would tell you that Five are personally responsible for the Queen karaoke experience. They started that.
Really?
Yeah, Brian May and Roger Taylor had been laying low for a number of years, and then they teamed up with Five, obviously, because, the excellent musicians at Five are, and they did not a great version of We Will Rock You.
Oh, God.
And I remember, like, Brian May and Roger Taylor had been laying low. Brian May had just come out of his solo career, and it was probably...
But if all the bands choose...
Yeah, it was probably late, 2000, early 2000, something like that. And I remember it was a Brit Awards, which is like the Grammys, that sort of thing, or one of those sort of shows.
I've seen
and
the
I was round
Spice
my
Girls
friend,
on it.
Yeah, and I was around my friend Hogg's house, and it came on, and it starts off with Five doing this We Will Rock You thing, and then the stage parts, and Brian May and Roger Taylor are there, and it was a whole thing. But they started this. They started this nonsense, which I wish would go away.
Okay, but if a band were going to start so here's my feeling on Slam Dunk Da Funk. I've heard that song a billion times because it was popular, and if you guys haven't heard it, please it's like slam dunk the funk, put it up if you got that feel. That's how it goes. So that should give you people out there, please don't copyright us. That should give us any indication of how the song goes. And I mean, it's not even like the Backstreet Boys or NSYNC, where at least you have like harmonies and some type of they're literally just singing like that chorus at you over and over again. But what's hilarious is I kind of forgot that was on here. So while at work today, I pull this up and I start clicking through. At first, I hear Soda Pop by Britney Spears. I'm like, oh, great. And then it goes to Slam Dunk Da Funk. And I was like, oh, poor Tim, because it was just kind of like on a shuffle on YouTube. And then it was like, hey, Mr. D. I was like, oh, God, Tim's a trooper, because it was just one pop hit right after the next. And spoiler alert, Soda Pop by Britney Spears is on here, which is another iconic pop kind of glory song for her. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with the Britney hits, but I was not familiar with Soda Pop. But again, listening to it with fresh ears, I think to myself, it's no Hit Me Baby One More Time or Slave or Toxic or songs that, it's not really my thing, but, they're well put together pop songs. But I'd say Soda Pop I didn't really think, classic Britney.
So that's what's funny about that is, so me and my friend Molly were talking about this album while I was telling her about the episode, and Soda Pop is one of those ones in my brain that is iconic because it doesn't fit a lot of the other Britney mold, but it's such a it's just iconic in its own right because it's just so poppy. I mean, it's not next level pop. If you guys have never heard it, it's next level pop. But you're right. It's just like every other song on this. It's not one of her main tracks that if you just listen to the radio, you would know about. Same deal.
Yeah, I would say the whole album is that either the licensing for these tracks was incredibly cheap, or the artists involved didn't want to put their best work on a Sabrina the Teenage Witch soundtrack album.
That's kind of true. And that's why I feel like it's like an off-branch. Who produced this album? What company was it? Let's see if I can find out. Because like Tim said, it's really hard to find this album or anything about it. Let's see. Amazon Music. I'm curious to see what company, if I can find out.
It's probably Arista or
So it does say it's songs that did appear in the show, so you're not crazy.
Okay.
It's Geffen, Geffen Records.
Yeah, Geffen Records. Geffen Records is a big record company.
Of that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. I've never even heard of that, guys. Tim knew it, but I didn't.
Well, as well, at the time, Sabrina the Teenage Witch was a big show. People were buying lots of CDs. I mean, because you bought it.
Yeah. It was one of the first albums I ever owned. That's actually a lot of these albums that I gave to for this episode are the first CDs that I owned as a kid. Like when I got my first CD player, these were the ones that I was playing, and that's part of the reason I picked them.
I can see a young Joy going into Virgin Records or FYE or whatever it is and thinking, yes,
Sabrina. Yeah, no, definitely. That as soon as I saw and the album cover, we'll have to post a picture of it. It's just very perfect. So, all right, Tim, let's move along now that you've gotten your Sabrina the Teen. Now you've got to go back and watch an episode of the show and tell us in the future what you think. All right. So the next one is, to no one's surprise, Spice by the Spice Girls.
Okay.
Go ahead, Tim.
So I would say out of all the albums that you gave me to listen to, and I won't say what the other ones are yet until we get to them, but I would say that one was probably by far my favorite.
Yay!
I already had it in my collection. I don't have it on a CD, but I have it in my digital collection. And I was familiar with a load of these songs already. I was familiar with Wannabe, Say You'll Be There, Two Become One, Mama, Who Do You Think You Are? And Naked as well. I'm familiar with all those songs. I would say that, as I said, it has great production. I was very surprised to see, because I looked up the Wikipedia article for this. Mm-hmm. I was very surprised to see that the Spice Girls get writing credits on all the songs. Now, when you look through, the people who wrote the songs are all like industry pop songwriters, people who've crafted all manner of pop songs from bands that have been created like this. And I wonder whether they actually had any input on these songs or whether they did what's known as a vanity writing credit, where they put their name on it because they know they're going to get 3% of royalties. And that's part of the deal they signed. As
the Spice Girls mega fan that I am, it's a vanity writing credit from what I understand. I think they did that across the board for multiple albums, which is smart business, guys. Don't think because like Tim says, they're going to make money off of it for the rest of their lives.
Sure. So I'm sure their deal with the production of this album was, if it shifts this many units, you get 3%, and we're going to add you to the songwriting credits, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So, but what's interesting about this album, and the reason I think it's so iconic, first of all, everybody out there worldwide, the Spice Girls are the number one best-selling girl group of all time worldwide, not in America. The Andrews Sisters beat them out in America, but only by like 5 million albums. Mm-hmm. But so worldwide, they're the number one, and Wannabe is still the highest grossing single of a girl band of all time to this day. Yeah,
I remember when that happened, because I think it was the Supremes prior to them. I think the Supremes held the record before. And people were like, how can you beat Diana Ross? I mean, what's going on?
Well, here's my thing about pop music and people who get upset about pop music. One, I'm a connoisseur of all kinds of music. I love Diana Ross and I can like the Spice Girls too. They don't have to be separate. You can like both. It's fine. But I absolutely adore this album. It has 4 singles on it, 4 or 5 singles, which is almost unheard of for a lot of albums. I feel like older albums had more singles than they do nowadays. Mm-hmm. But every single song on this, most people would generally know. And this was their debut album. And it's just hit after hit after hit.
As I said, I had it and I've heard it before, but even just like listening to it again a few times, researching this episode, almost every song I knew. And then and even the ones that are album tracks are still good stuff. This album does have my favorite Spice Girls track of all time, which is Who Do You Think You Are? That is an incredibly well-written pop song. It's got a disco vibe to it. The bass line is like done in octaves, like a disco-type bass line. And I don't know, there's something about that track that really speaks to me. And it reminds me of a great trip I made once as well.
Oh, so I would say, though, so you've got, for people out there who are going, okay, that's fine, but what songs are we talking about? We've got Wannabe, Two Become One, Say You'll Be There, Who Do You Think You Are, Something Kind of Funny, which wasn't necessarily a single, but most people have heard it. Mama, which we talked about on the a few episodes back. Naked, which Jim said he actually knew, which surprised me because that's one that's very obscure. I've only heard it a few times. And If You Can't Dance. And I will say this across the board. I feel like the Spice Girls really could have been a disco band back in the day. They would easily fit the mold because they had that sound. They just have a sound to them that fits.
Sure, because I mean, if you put their way their vocals are arranged, and I mean, I've got some Village People albums which I bought in a thrift shop, And, you know, Village People, YMCA, etc., etc. But if you listen to the person who put that act together, and you listen to this classic disco, it's like a disco band with all the orchestral stuff, and it has that sound. And I don't see any reason why, like you say, if this act had been around back then and was playing with that kind of backing track, it would fit just fine.
I mean, think about it, the beginning of If You Can't Dance, If You Can't Dance. Like, it literally, you can't do nothing for me. Like, it plays, like, it has that kind of opening that you hear a lot in disco music, that kind of almost grandiose opening. So, yeah, overall, though, when I went back and listened to this, because Spice, I mean, I've heard every Spice Girl song. I love quite a few other Spice Girl songs that are not on this album. But overall, I'd say every single one of these songs is relatively popular, which says a lot about them as a group. Whether you like them or not, it says a lot about them.
Absolutely. And the other thing I was going to say with my research of this, I think I knew this anyway, is certainly in the UK, it was a double A side, Mama and Who Do You Think You Are? It was a double A side, and Mama was released as a charity single for UK Comic Relief.
I don't know that I think you said that to me once before, but I had never heard that. But it was definitely a double release. I've heard that.
Yeah, it was a double A side because I think predominantly the radio played "Who Do You Think You Are," but then the Mama piece became a Comic Relief single. I think they have Comic Relief here now with the Red Noses. Is that a thing now?
Yeah, like, they do like the National Comic Day or something.
Yeah, but that was happening in England I think it started in the early 90s where you'd wear the red noses and it was like a telethon charity type thing. But yeah, it was used for that.
Interesting.
One other thing I found out just prior to this album being recorded, there was another Spice Girl called Michelle Stevenson. And she decided that she was going to leave. She said that her mother was unwell. But I think it came out later on that, yes, her mother was unwell, but she'd fallen out with somebody or something, or was let go or something along those lines. And she was replaced by Emma Bunton.
Yes.
And then that was just prior to the recording of this.
Mm-hmm. She lived with them in the house, whatever, because, Simon Fuller, is that his name? Mm-hmm. He had them all living in the house together. And there was another one. I knew her name was Michelle. I didn't know what her last name was. And she was up to the point of this. And then something happened and they never really admitted to what was going on. There was but when you have a pop group and you're all living together, there's always some type of drama, and the media is going to make it into something more than it probably ever was.
Exactly.
But yes, I've heard that. Just with Destiny's Child. Remember, well, I don't know how much Tim knows about Destiny's Child, but there was a member of Destiny's Child that was there for the first two albums, and then she just kind of disappeared and was replaced.
It wasn't her destiny.
Wasn't her destiny. All right, so Tim has had his Spice Girls fix.
Yeah,
which is
as I said, this one was not a chore to listen to because I consider them very well put together pop songs of the era. And as I said, I do really like Who Do You Think You Are?
Well, and their concept of girl power, and they had the hype around them. And I think it was even bigger in Europe from what I understand. The Spice Girls were huge in the early 90s to the point that they were quoting kind of that Beatles mania type thing. I'm not saying they're the Beatles, but that type hype.
I mean, it was a thing. I mean, they played at Wembley Stadium. I mean, they were on the TV and the radio. It was a cultural phenomenon of the day.
Now, I will say I had Spice Girls clothing. Every person my age dressed up with their friends at least one Halloween as the Spice Girls. Pretty sure I was Ginger Spice. And I mean, we had shoes, handbags, shirts, albums, everything under the sun. The little Spice Girls Barbie dolls they made with each individual characters. I had purses. I had everything Spice Girls. So not only they marketed themselves that way on purpose, I realized it's a marketing scheme, but it worked because we were obsessed.
Yeah, and I think I can't remember if I mentioned it on this podcast before, where the nicknames come from. Did I mention that?
I think you did, but I don't remember what you said.
So there was a UK magazine called Smash Hits, which was a pop magazine of the day. And just as the Spice Girls were coming out, whoever the art director was did a piece on them. And they had a spice rack. And then they put their picture on each of the spice bottles. And whoever typeset it put sporty, posh, all their names on it. And that was the person who came up with the nicknames.
Well, and let's just talk about that for a second. How smart marketing is that to give each character? Because what you're doing is you're giving each little girl or boy, I don't care, boys can listen to it too, but each person someone to look up to. And maybe they're not sporty, maybe they are a posh, or maybe they're not posh and they are Scary Spice. You give them some, so the marketing, once again, great. Whoever, the person who wrote that did not realize they sold that marketing to them. What they really did, though, think about it, Tim. It's like we're a group, but we're each our own person, you know?
Exactly.
And actually, there's a funny joke on in Spice World, the movie, where they're talking about like their stereotypes and, you know, I'm more than this and da 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 da, which is cliche, I realize. Well, Scary Spice is talking to somebody at that party, right? Whenever they go into that party where Ginger says that thing about, is the Pope Catholic, and everybody freaks out. But Scary Spice or Posh, which one was it? I think it was Posh. She walks up to this lady and she's like, oh my God, I'm standing beside Posh Spice or whatever. And she's like, well, what do you think about manta ray? And she's talking about the fish manta ray, not like, and the lady's like, these are manta ray glasses and these are manta ray shoes. Because she assumes that Posh would be talking about a clothing designer. So even they kind of played on it. So great marketing, just saying. All right, next album. Once again, we're going to go back to the it's Genie in a Bottle, but it's also labeled as the self-titled album by Christina Aguilera. I've seen it labeled both ways. I can't remember what the official title was, but it was the album that Christina Aguilera released in 1999 in her debut album, as well as What a Girl Wants, I Turn to You, Come On Over. So, Tim, thoughts about Christina Aguilera?
Okay, so when I found it, you gave me the name of Genie in a Bottle, and I couldn't find it under that name. So yeah. I found it just as the Christina Aguilera self-titled.
I've seen it wrote both, so that's where I got confused.
The self-titled album. Again, I already had this in my collection. I don't know where it came from, though. It's not something that I've actively listened to, but it's just hanging out there on my hard disk. Who knows where it came from? But well, now we got
use out of it.
I would say that there's no, for me on this album, there's no beautiful. You know, like on Stripped, she has much of it is just like poppy, housey music, and then there's that track which is significantly different, which was a real vocal piece.
Yeah.
This doesn't have that. Is this her first album?
Yeah, this was her debut album.
Okay, so maybe she hadn't fully developed her vocal style at this point. I would say that the looking at the notes that I made were my multiple listens, as I listened to all these albums multiple times, it had a very 90s production sound. Like a lot of this stuff that we're discussing here has a certain sound to it. And also, much like some of the other albums that we've yet to discuss, it must have been very fashionable in the 90s to inject wacky sound effects. Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of that going on. And I don't know whether that comes from like scratching DJ culture where you play things on a different record, but there are like weird, wacky sound effects that comes through it. The whole of this album reminds me very much. Are you familiar with a singer called Anastasia?
Yeah, I've heard of her before. I know what you're talking about.
It reminds me very much of this. I don't know whether that they share a producer or whether it was just a something of the time, but it did. As I was listening to it, it reminded me of Anastasia. The version of the album I have has terrible dance remixes on it. I don't know. I think we've covered this before, where you get the standard tracks and then like DJ Bob and someone featuring someone else.
Dave Frank over here.
Yeah, all these people you've never heard of doing some urban club cut remix something.
I want to hear all of those now. Because, okay, so I will say Tim's on to something with this album specifically. So one thing to keep in mind was in January of the same year, so this came out in 1999, Britney Spears released Baby One More Time. So then in June or so of that same year, Christina Aguilera put this album out, which, like I said, I thought it was Genie in a Bottle, but that's just the main single on it. It looks like it's self-entitled Christina Aguilera. Anyway, just what my child brain named it as. So with that being said, I think that this album was almost to try to compete with Britney. Mm-hmm. So I think that's why you're getting some of those kind of like, because Christina, no offense to Britney, and I love Britney and part of Free Britney, all that kind of movement. Don't get me started on Britney, but Christina was a better singer of the two. It's well known. She's a much better vocalist than Britney. Let's just say Christina can do Britney. I don't know that Britney can do Christina. Let's just leave it at that. So
I mean, Britney came from Disney Club, and I mean, she was an actress probably first and a singer after the fact.
Technically, Christina Aguilera was in the Mickey Mouse Club too.
No,
she was too. But it's. I mean, we're not speaking things people don't already know. The other thing about Britney is that's what you hear Britney singing. That's not her regular voice. That's her. They've made her sing in this weird kind of baby voice to make her America's sweetheart. Well, she actually was, if you look at the young versions of her, like singing Talent Search and stuff, she had a sultry, deep voice, almost like a countertenor or something. Whereas Christina Aguilera is obviously a very high soprano when she wants to be, but she can also do all the mezzo soprano things too. So she can do some alto sound and some high sound. So it's very interesting. But my point being is I think that Britney released her album and then this album was only a few months later. I think this album was to try to compete with America's Sweetheart. And that's why it doesn't quite feel like it's Christina. It's more of a, let's see if we can compete type thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's why it doesn't have a beautiful like from Stripped on it. Because like you say, it was put together to compete with Britney, and they're trying to not so much copy, but the vibe of the day, the songwriting style of the day, the production style of the day. They're just trying to do that.
And I mean, you've got like on this album, you have Genie in a Bottle, Come On Over, What a Girl Wants. They're all very, What a Girl Wants could easily compete with, say, Hit Me Baby One More Time. And that Soda Pop song you heard was on Britney's first album. What else was on Britney's first album? Oh, You Drive Me Crazy, which is also one that I'm sure you've heard before. So my theory on this is it wasn't too long after that one came out. I think it was just her try to. And then later on, Christina got a little bit more of the reins of producing her own music, I think. And then you started to hear her own sound.
Sure. And I mean, as far as highlights on this, Genie in a Bottle. That's a pretty good track. What a Girl Wants is probably my favorite track on the whole album.
That's mine too.
And I've got the track list here, and I think it has two remixes. One is someone's arrangement featuring someone else, and it's like, why do they do that? I mean, like this has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 remix tracks on the end, and it's like,
good lord,
yeah, it's like you take these songs, you either like them or you don't, and it's like, well, let's just make it more dancey, and it's like, no, just leave it where it is.
Oh, I mean, yeah, and let's be honest, it's already poppy enough. I don't think you need to take it to the next level.
Exactly.
All right, so let's break the pop music with something that I know is very obscure and random for Tim. Selena.
Yeah, so we've spoken about Selena before. As you found out, Selena did not break the UK market. Selena was not a thing in the UK. Nobody knows who... I mean, I'm sure there are fans, but the average person who lived through the pop music era of that time would not know who Selena was. And I said, when we brought it up on the Freak Jam Zoom call, and you asked a few other people that are not me with my narrow music knowledge...
time period.
Yeah, nobody knew who Selena was either.
No. They thought I was talking about the modern-day Selena.
Yeah, so this was a first listen for me. I'd not heard of any of her music. I'd listened to a podcast about her because I didn't know anything about her. And your husband gave me a Selena Funko, which I have in my office, which is cool. But this was the first. This is my first listen to the world of Selena. So I looked into the Wikipedia article, and it was her fifth and final album. Mm-hmm. Now, I couldn't find out, was this released while she was alive, or was it released after she was killed? I
think it was released right before, like days before she was killed.
Okay.
Like within like a week.
Because it didn't, the article I read, it wasn't very clear.
Well, actually it says posthumously, but it was very, very, very shortly after. So it was very close to when she was killed.
Yeah, because it didn't, listening to the whole album as a piece, like even like the Christina Aguilera album I listened to before, it's a very cohesive album with tracks that are picked out and it all runs one into the other, and it's a thing. The Spice Girls album exactly the same. This sounded a little bit more cut and paste. So I wondered whether it was released after she died.
I think so. I've heard. So whenever I have the version of the Selena Dreaming of You album has a little thing at the end where her brothers and her producers and her family are talking about this album. And he went into detail about some of that I think could contribute. One, he said the only song Selena had any input on of this album is Dreaming of You, the English verse. So for those out there, there's a mix of English and Spanish. So if I'm not even going to try to pronounce some of the Spanish names. We're just going to say number 11. I mean, I know how to say Como le fue, Bitty Bitty Bum Bum. Those are all pretty famous ones from her. But there's some of these that I wouldn't even know. Like there's one that's in English is God's Child, but it's got a Spanish name. But he said the only song in this that she had any pick or anything of was Dreaming of You. And actually, when she sang it for them, they hated it. They didn't like it. But they said once she produced it, put the music to it, got her, got into it. Because Tim and me have talked about this. If you guys have never heard, and even me as a singer, like I still twin sometimes. You've never heard raw track singing. It's not always great. You need to have some of that. Like, yes, you can sing a cappella and sometimes it sounds good, but sometimes real raw vocals to sound good need the music, need the background, there's a reason why we listen to music that way. Sure. So they said that they hated it. And then once she got her song in there and she got into the recording studio, it became beautiful. And now that she's passed away, it's even more beautiful to them. So that could be part of it. And apparently they were already setting up to record her next album. So he had been sent to like some other states to find producers for her next album that they thought would work well with Selena. So rather than sending Selena, because she was like out doing whatever she's doing, and I think this is her brother, but don't quote me, and I don't remember exactly who was talking. He was going out and trying to find a new producer for her next album. So I think that contribute. I think that she was in a bunch of places while they were doing this. Like, Selena was running her own store. She was like a worldwide sensation touring, and she was putting out albums, and then she passes away. And I don't know if they pieced some of this together. He says it's posthumously, but it was within the same year. And I think they're very close to when she passed, this album came out. So that could contribute. But yeah, it doesn't really have like, when you hear an album that flows from A to B, it doesn't really do that.
No, because it, as I said, looking through my notes here and certainly listening to it a number of times, it has English and it has Spanish tracks on it. But some of the Spanish tracks don't fit the mold of the rest of the album. Now, there was a track on there. I can't pronounce it. El Toro Rijar.
Yeah, right towards the end. I know what you're talking about.
And it has a very much a traditional Spanish sound to it. It has a flamenco guitar on it. And I would say that was maybe my favorite track of the album. It had a really good sound to it, but it sounded completely out of place with all the others.
Yeah, I could agree with you on that because it comes out of nowhere. But one other thing is with Selena, and she never grew up speaking Spanish. So she's a later in life, her family's from Mexico, obviously, and her mom and dad spoke Spanish, but she was like, so there's a name for it. Whenever your family's from Mexico, but you don't necessarily speak Spanish, there's like a term for it. She was one of those kids. My older sister could tell you because she makes fun of her kids that are those. But I shouldn't say makes fun of, picks on them because and so she learned Spanish so she could sing this Mexican American music because it was like a good way for her to get her in, I guess you could say, to give. And there's a name for it. It's like TAGANO or something. I'm not going to try to say it, but it's like that Mexican American thing. So she actually was obsessed with Donna Summer. She loved disco and actually wanted to sing more disco type music. So one other thing is I think that she was trying to bring in some of those influences from the Mexican background and trying to put those in there. But I don't know that her heart was always in those two. I don't know how to explain it. There's a disconnect there. Now, I will say the song you're talking about is absolutely beautiful, and the Spanish guitar on it is gorgeous. And then there's like Bitty Bitty Bum Bum, which is just a very pop track that happens to be in Spanish.
Sure. I also like the track Techno Cumbia.
I have no clue how to say it either.
No, that was a good track. That had a good beat to it. Mm-hmm. Again, another one that's sung in Spanish. I will say that the lead track, "Dreaming of You," to me, it sounds like a Madonna album track.
Oh my God! Okay, Tim, that is so weird because when I was listening to it today, I literally thought her tone sounds like Madonna. And she is a mezzo soprano. Madonna is a mezzo soprano. So a lot of the things that they're going to be singing, Madonna's famously a mezzo soprano. And for those out there that doesn't know what that means, I'm a mezzo soprano. A soprano is someone who can just, sing all the high notes and go for days, and it's natural to them. A mezzo soprano is somebody who falls just under that. So we can sing some of the high notes, but we can't, Mariah Carey sing it out there. But then we can also hit a few of the alto lower register notes. So it's kind of this middle area. And it's kind of a nice area to be in if you like pop music, because a lot of your famous Beyonce, Madonna, they're all mezzo sopranos. But I was listening to this while she was singing, and I was like, this sounds like True. Like when me and Tim were talking about the True Blue album a few weeks back, I was like, she sounds like her voice actually has a tone like Madonna's. Not only does the sound like it's produced, but I made that connection too. That's crazy, Tim.
Yeah, as I said, I was trying to think where I could place it, and then when I listened to it back a few times, I was like, yeah, it sounds like a Madonna album track.
Well, if you think about it, this is 95. That sound was probably in style. And Madonna has pop music, but she kind of has music that's all over the place. And that's what this has, music that's kind of all over the place. So that's funny, though. I heard that parallel, too. And it's probably because I listened to True Blue a few weeks back, like 3 times in a row. So it's in my brain. But yeah, or I Could Fall in Love when she was singing that. I thought that sounded just like Madonna again. I wonder if I Googled that, if other people have heard that.
I can see that. Though I will say, like, Madonna's True Blue goes through some different genres. I mean, it has a sort of 50s feel to it, but again, it's like the work is self-contained, if you know what I mean. It's like it's all the same work. But I said this sounds like a badly put together greatest hits album, where you've got 2 or 3 tracks that are similar, and then you've got the songs that are sung in Spanish, and then you've got the one with the Spanish guitar in it, and then you've got one which has got more of a disco beat to it. It doesn't flow well. That's made me think it was completed after she was killed.
Yeah, and I imagine that I almost feel, because from what I remember, it's very close to when she was killed. They rushed it and just threw it out there because she had just passed, and it is what it was. But it is a critically acclaimed album. For the time that she was alive, even though she doesn't seem like she was worldwide, she was very popular, and I'm guessing you could hear why, Tim. She would be. She would have been popular during that time. And her voice is gorgeous. She's also a good dancer. I mean, obviously you can't see that in the album, but she took into that kind of Paula Abdul, Madonna kind of dancing on stage thing. And she dressed the way Madonna would dress and things like that. So that helped bring her into stardom in America. Sure.
And also reading some articles about it, this did actually sell very well in Mexico.
Yeah, she was, there's actually this famous concert, and maybe I'll find a video and put it up there. So it's in the Selena, the movie from the 90s. I have no idea if they've referenced it in the new TV show and stuff. I haven't watched any of that. But there's a movie. If you haven't watched it, I highly suggest it. No matter where you're at, go back and watch it. It's a story. It's like a biopic of her life from the point that she started becoming, and Jennifer Lopez plays Selena, which makes sense with the dancing and the, being able to speak Spanish, and she has the look. And J-Lo surprisingly actually sings. She sings live in the whole movie, so it's actually her singing, and she's very good.
Okay.
Which she doesn't always have the greatest vocals. I'm not done, but she did very good in this movie. Okay, that's funny. I stopped because I looked up when I was looking at the thing on Dreaming of You, compared to songs recorded by Madonna and Paula Abdul. We're on to something, Tim.
Look at that. Who'd have thought it?
Yay. Okay, anyway. So in the movie, though, there's a concert where she's in Mexico. Because she used to perform across the border. And so she would go and that's what's funny is where she didn't speak Spanish. She had to learn Spanish to do press releases and, not have 10 people. So there's this famous concert where she's performing and the audience gets too amped up and they start storming the stage. And this is not to insult Mexico. I have nothing against Mexico. I don't think the stage was up to code.
Mm-hmm.
Stage like starts almost falling in while she's on it. And so what she does is she has the band slow down the tempo of the music and she starts singing a little bit quietly to make the audience quiet, and then she slowly goes back into the song. And the weird part is in this, there's actual footage of her basically mesmerizing the audience and getting them to back up. So like her and her band didn't die pretty much. I mean, they were literally gonna like, they just, it's almost like when you see someone in a mosh pit and they're getting too amped up, they kept like getting closer and closer and closer to the stage. I don't think there was any form of security like you would see in America, and the stage was wooden, and you can see like they're rushing her, and instead of like freaking out, she like takes the time to like, it's kind of like when you're dealing with a little kid, they say don't get loud, get quiet. Mm-hmm. And they're more likely to calm themselves. She basically did that with the whole audience, and it's actually really cool if you've never seen it.
I mean, me and Selena have a lot in common then, because back in England, when I used to I used to do discos occasionally with bands, and I sometimes would go out and do a disco without the band if the money was right, but I go out and do, especially with the Moroccan Soul, which is like a function band I was in. We would go and do a party or a wedding, and I'd do the disco. And you get towards the end of the night, and you want to make everybody calm down and get the dance floor empty for the most part, and then bring the evening to a close. So, you'd be amping them up, you'd be playing Come On Eileen and YMCA and all the cheesy stuff, and people are having a great time. And then it's coming up to a time when you have to finish. So what do? You put on ABBA's Thank You for the Music, which has an incredibly quiet, long, drawn-out intro. So half of the people on the dance floor are just going to go because they're like, well, we can't dance anymore. This is terrible. And then the people who are like probably a little bit worse for wear will hang around. And then by the end of it, they're all hugging, going, thank you for the music. And then it's got
turn the light on.
Yeah. And then it's got a long, drawn-out exit. And then you turn the lights on and everyone's had a great time. So I feel that I never met Miss Selena, but I feel that we have a kinship.
And every bar I've ever been to, they just ironically play Closing Time, which yours is more unique. Every bar I've ever been to, it hits about 2 a.m. They start playing Closing Time, and someone flips on a light and tells you to go.
Yeah, we used to play O'Neill's in Woking, which is, I know, a pub which I know you're very familiar with, Joy.
Yeah, it was there just last week.
Yeah, and they always used to play Closing Time when they were kicking people out.
Overrated. All right, well, I'm glad Tim has gotten to learn about an artist he did not know about and give her some appreciation, because she was a wonderful singer who died way too young.
Exactly.
All right. She's not the first or the last, I know, but I have a special place in my heart for her. All right. The next one is Backstreet Boys, Millennium.
Okay. So I cursorily am familiar with the Backstreet Boys. I mean, I lived through this era. I didn't pay a lot of attention to music and TV in this era, but I was alive then. I some things I would have come into my transom, as it were. But I diligently listened to this album multiple times, and I also did some research on it.
Okay.
I found out that it was, in fact, their third album. And for me, the highlight track, which is a track I'd heard previously, was I Want It That Way.
Of course.
Which I'd imagine was the big hit single from that album.
So I think there was 4 singles. It's probably I Want It That Way, Larger Than Life, Show Me the Meaning of Being Lonely, and The One. I would say those were probably the 4 major tracks from that album. Not sure if they were the 4 singles, but those are the ones just looking at it, I know made worldwide success, and you hear still to this day. I mean, who hasn't heard Show Me the Meaning of Being Lonely a million times in their life? So you're probably right. So was this one torture, Tim?
No, this was not torture at all. I mean, it has, I will say, I mean, I don't know anything much about the Backstreet Boys, and I know you're a fan and you've seen them, etc. But compared to some of the other stuff that we listen to here, they had incredibly good vocal harmonies. And it reminded me, in a way, of Boys to Men. It's that kind of stacked harmony thing. You find a lot of these acts where you have 5 attractive people who stand in a row who dance at the same time. often they are singing in unison, or in the case of the Spice Girls, they'll take a line each. Mm-hmm. This is very much more of a traditional vocal group where they all harmonize together.
So I would agree with that. The Spice Girls do it a little bit, but not near as much as the Backstreet Boys and even NSYNC. NSYNC also had great harmonies. And if you ever heard the NSYNC Christmas album, it's pretty cool. If you've ever heard it, it's got a lot of their harmonies that are a little bit more stripped back and you can hear it. But I think a couple of things happen with the Backstreet Boys. So if you guys have never heard the history of the Backstreet Boys, it goes back to the same thing we were talking about with the Spice Girls. They get a bunch of guys, they put them all together, they live together. And that guy who went to jail and like took all their money or whatever that produced them, what is his name? I can't remember his name, but there's a guy who famously went to jail recently and they ended up suing him and NSYNC ended up suing him and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Because he wrote himself in as the sixth Backstreet Boy and made just as much money as they did off of every album in their record contract, which is kind of messed up. But he put them all in this house together. And Brian is the youngest. I think they said he was like 13 when they first started this. And then I want to say Kevin Perlman, Lou Pearlman. We talked about him in another episode.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Because of the hot air balloon. No, what is that thing called? Not a hot air balloon, a blimp.
Yes.
He had the fake blimp build business, which is so weird. Anyway, so he put them all together. But Brian Luttrell, I think, is probably the youngest. Kevin Richardson is probably the oldest. So you've got kids all the way from 13 to 19, pretty much, in this house together. And they basically work them day in, day out, constantly, just singing. And the big thing was to develop the harmonies. And so that was their selling point. I think that's what made them stick over like a band like Five. We were talking about a minute ago, Five Bad Boys with the Power to Rock. Like that's what they sang. It was all them singing the same thing at the same time. Whereas the Backstreet Boys actually knew music and they had good ears and they have good voices. And if you hear them live, I can say this from experience, they sound exactly like the album. Exactly. Piece for piece for piece.
Yeah, and that doesn't surprise me, as I said, because they are harmonizing. So, I mean, you can correct stuff in the studio. You can auto-tune things. You can make it sound good. But having listened to this album on repeat for a number of days, I can tell you that the vocal sound is good. The other thing about this album, much like one of the other albums we spoke of, this was the era of sound effects. And this does have wacky sound effects thrown in at odd places. So
another thing, Tim, I don't know if you caught on to this. Robert John Mutt Lang produced the album.
Mutt makes another
him, and then there's this guy. His name's Max Martin. I was telling Tim, I watched a whole thing about him. So if you guys have not heard this thing about Sweden and putting pop music out, it's like a whole thing. Sweden is known for making really good pop music. Max Martin, or he goes by like Dins Pop or something. So I think it was Dins Pop and then Max Martin. They're both Swedish. They both worked with the Backstreet Boys. Max Martin was on this album. But then I saw, and I knew that, but then I saw Robert John Mutt Lang, and I had never even heard of him until 6 months ago, and now I can't get rid of it. I was like, oh, he's the guy singing on the back of the Shania Twain album. Tim's like, no, Joy. He's worked with like 7,400 other people, and now I can't get rid of him.
I mean, he's famous for a lot of things, but he's very famous for Def Leppard's Hysteria.
Well, that makes sense, and I guess he's still alive, right? Because he's still producing. He worked with Lady Gaga recently, apparently.
Yeah, one thing about Mutt Lang is that he doesn't give interviews and he doesn't speak to the press. He goes. It's his job. He goes in and he works with his acts, and then he goes home, and he doesn't get involved with the rock and roll lifestyle at all.
And he's from Africa, right? He's like South African.
He's South African, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I literally had never noticed him, and that's probably why, because he doesn't go out and say anything. He doesn't talk about himself. You never hear anything about him. And one day I flipped over the Shania Twain album, and now I can't get rid of it.
Everything ever is produced by Mutt Lang. So I felt that this album, it has a dance-orientated remix sound. Like, where were these other albums where they do a remix version of the tracks? It's already like that in a kind of dance style.
Yeah.
I will say that to some degree, apart from that track, I Want It That Way, it's tricky to distinguish the tracks for me. It doesn't have peaks and troughs. It's sort of the same thing all the way through to some degree.
That's the way I felt when I had to listen to that Deep Purple album you gave me. I was like, am I on the same song or a different song? It all just kind of flowed. You know what I mean? Like everything, you're like, okay, is this the same song or am I on a new song?
Yeah, and I think to that degree, I mean, one comment I put down, and maybe this is unkind to somebody who's a Backstreet Boys superfan, but it struck me a little bit like lift music in so much as that you put it on, it's not offensive, it's pleasant to the ear, it's got a good tune, and though it doesn't really go anywhere for the most part, it's, you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, no, I exactly know what you mean. It just kind of flows. Makes sense to me.
If you was in your dentist's surgery waiting to be seen and the Backstreet Boys were playing, it ticks all the boxes for something you want that's not offensive. It's just pleasant to the ear. So
you mean that it's probably allowed on the UK hospital radio?
I would imagine, yeah. They have a strict diet of Backstreet Boys.
I still cannot believe that I was sitting there thinking, okay, so when Tim says UK hospital music, I really imagine like when you're at the grocery store and it's just playing over your bed the entire day. And I'm like, that sounds terrible. Because what if you're stuck listening to you're getting ready to go have your kidney surgery and you're stuck hearing achy breaky heart for the last 5 minutes. Which is fine, but it's not what I want to hear before I have a kidney surgery. So I was enlightened on that one. But I would imagine, Sarah, can you confirm, does Backstreet Boys come on Hospital UK all the time?
Well, she said, I believe she put on one of the comments of her Facebook pages that she'd worked at Frimley Park Hospital for however long years, and she'd never ever heard Radio Frimley Park.
Huh. What park?
Frimley Park Hospital.
Oh, okay. I was like, Friendly Park? Okay.
It's where I was born, Joy. I was born at Frimley Park Hospital.
You're the second one, remember? Weren't you the second one born there? Is that what you said?
I was the second one born at Frimley Park Hospital.
There's somebody going, I was the first. If you were the first person, please let us know. Facebook.com/No Day Musiccast.
Yeah, if you was the first baby born at Frimley Park Hospital, which would probably be prior to probably early 1974. Please write in.
Well, you never know. All right. We have a few more we got to get through, so we'll go ahead. And these ones are, I don't know that we have to go into so much detail, and there's one or two of them we really can't because they're not appropriate. So this one, I forgot all about how bad this one was when I sent it to Tim, and I hope he didn't try to listen to it at work. I said a Bikini Kills. Yeah.
Well, so I found this, and what got me about this is for one, it's only seven. It's seven. The original issue of this is 7 tracks, and they reissued it some time ago, and it had a second disc, and it had different versions and live versions and expanded stuff. But the original version of that Bikini Kill album is 7 tracks, and it runs for 15 minutes.
And you can hear the whole video on YouTube.
Yeah, and it's in and you're out. I will say, of all the music that you gave me to listen to, this was by far the most interesting and also the most surprising.
So I am a huge fan of Rebel Girl. That was probably, if you know anything for Bikini Kill, you know the song Rebel Girl. But I do listen. I told you guys, my music genre taste can go anywhere from Rebel Girl to Dolly Parton, as you guys have picked up. I think Tim can agree with that. So I like their punk sound. What's funny though is in the comments on this, and I'm not going to get into the details because it's literally just them screaming at you and what sounds like punk music, right, Tim?
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. So what's in the beginning, it makes a comment. Did you listen to the one where the guy's talking in the beginning before they start?
Sure, yeah.
We're not going to say it, but he makes a very sexist comment, and this is like in response to him. And then they just start screaming at you punk music. So they were big feminists of the age, and they're very a little obscure. They're early 90s, like 93, 92. But but I just love them. But in the comments, somebody said something about I wish that the sound quality was better. Of all, there's many albums that I've heard, and I wish the sound quality was better on this one. And everybody's like, that's the point. It's supposed to have that rugged kind of pop sound, or punk sound, I mean. So if you hear this, it's going to get loud. It's going to get quiet. They're going to be yelling at you. There's like hard guitar riffs. But I just thought it would break up some of what Tim was listening to. But this was also a favorite album of mine. And I had the original 7 tracks, and then they added, I think it went up to 14 tracks if you Google it now or something. I haven't listened to the extended version, to be honest. When I listen to this album, I always click on that YouTube video that you could just listen to it from the beginning to the end. Yeah.
I will say, I mean, my highlight, I've got it written down here. The highlight is Rebel Girl. That is the standout track on this album. And now you're saying about the sound quality. I like good quality sound, and I'm one that would listen to an album and maybe in my mind critique the mix or wish they would remix something or remaster something. But I'm with you. If this was polished, it would not have the same impact at all, because like you put it on and it's like an assault because it's just like boom and you're straight in it. It sounds like almost a bit like the Ramones in a way, because it's very fast and heavy. But the thing is, even the Ramones sound polished compared to this. This is very. I put down it's got like a DIY sound. And what it sounds like is a band turned up in a garage and someone set a little cassette recorder going. Is what it sounds like.
But in my opinion, and what everybody else said, that's what they were going for. Have you ever heard of the Donnas?
Yeah.
Tim. So I know you've probably heard "It's Too Bad About Your Girl. She Doesn't Look That" kind of there. So they were actually, the Donnas had a band previous to the Donnas. They changed their name, and I can't remember, something cute or something. It doesn't matter. They were in the movie in the 90s called Drive Me Crazy. So in that movie, the original Donnas are the band that she's trying to get to play for their prom, and they're too punk, too kind of out there for them, and they don't want them. One of the girls says, "We're going to try to get Brandy. That's the sound we're going for." So think like Brandy from the 90s. But in the video, they're like on a robot, and they're singing and they're playing, and the robot's picking them up, and it's homemade. It has this sound. So while I love, modern day Donnas that you hear is very polished, they had that same kind of thing before then. So it does. It sounds like a band that you went and you and your friend sat on a very sticky couch listening to in your garage when you were in the early 90s. But it's cool. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of liken it. I mean, I'm not a fan, but I sort of liken it to Nirvana's Bleach. Have you ever heard that? Mm-hmm. Which was the album prior to Nevermind, and it doesn't have Butch Vig's production, and it doesn't have Dave Grohl on drums. But I will say that comparing this to Bleach makes Bleach sound like it has a $10 million production with Mutt Lange doing it. I mean, as I said, this is rough. But
Tim didn't know what to expect.
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't want it to be anything other than rough.
Yes, if you're going, they went for the punk sound. Another band that I associate with them during this time period is the ones who sing coin opera, the Dresden Dolls. Have you ever heard of the Dresden Dolls?
I've heard of the name. I'm not familiar with the band, though.
So they're another one of these bands that I liked. And in their earlier, they kind of sounded like this. I mean, if you really want to get down to it, and this is very... I don't know if I would make this comparison, but Cherry Bomb, like the original Cherry Bomb song before Joan Jett, like how they're kind of yelling at you and she's like, Cherry Bomb, and it's got those sounds. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, same kind of idea.
Same kind of thing. So that's where, if you guys haven't heard it, we can't talk a lot about what the content of the songs are because they're not appropriate. Yeah. That's all I could say on that one, but I'm glad you liked it. It broke up the monotony, and please give them a try if you really like punk music because they're cool.
Yeah, I wouldn't even call it punk. I'd even maybe call it proto-grunge. That's
probably a better way of saying it, because when I say punk, people are going to automatically think I mean like the Sex Pistols or something.
Yeah. But no, I was surprised by this, but at the same time, I was pleased you put it on the list, and I could hit certainly the track on there I like the best, Rebel Girl. I could see myself listening to that again because it's got a really catchy hook.
Oh yeah, and it'll stay in your head for like 6 weeks after you hear it. I just randomly, and I have no clue, truthfully, no clue at all where I learned Bikini Kill. But I have a theory. There's this girl that moved into my middle school, and she was like, she came from Nikki. If you're listening, she's still a friend of mine. She was very much more edgy than I was, super cool. And I remember, I think she was the one who taught me about Rebel Girl, and then from there, I went and found the other songs.
Well, there you go. Maybe you can get her to listen to this episode, so you know that she's been name checked in your musical development.
That's true. Okay, yeah, Nikki, I'm going to send this to you afterwards. I won't give your last name out, but if you're out there. All right. So to change it up again, and this one I think probably surprised. I don't know if it surprised Tim as much. It may have been out of his wheelhouse. It's the TLC Crazy Sexy Cool.
Okay. So let me tell you about TLC's Crazy Sexy Cool. All of these, let me look through my list again. All of these albums, I could listen to any of these at any time. And, you know, so I liked Spice Girls, who I thought was the best one. But, you know, we discussed all the other ones. And all of those albums are fine. And if they were on in the car, or if they were playing at work when I was working, or if they was at home, I probably wouldn't make a point of switching it off. This album, to me, is terrible. It has one redeeming factor, which is that Waterfalls song. That is a well put together pop song with a good hook, and it's a good song of the day. But much like we discussed earlier, they don't sing harmony; they sing in unison. Mm-hmm. But the rest of the album, it's too rappy for me, and like every third track, there's an interlude. Where it's like interlude featuring DJ someone.
So this was the most R&B hip hop kind of thing, and Chili one of them isn't even really a singer. One of them is actually mostly a rapper, so that kind of plays in. So I would say though, Tim, and you, of course, Waterfalls is great. Everybody's heard Waterfalls. One thing that makes this, and it's actually ranked in the 500 greatest albums of all time according to Rolling Stones. It's like 12 times platinum, but if it's not your thing, it's not your thing. They talk a lot about like. They have a lot of themes in their music, kind of like Waterfall touches on a lot of themes that plays into this. But my songs, I love Creep. I don't know if you paid attention to that song. Digging on You is probably the other one I like, and Red Light Special. And then Waterfalls. Outside of those four songs, I wouldn't recognize one other song that's on this album, because it's kind of like Tim was saying, it all kind of runs together at some point.
Yeah, I mean, when I played it the first time, I played it on the TV downstairs, and I rarely use streaming, but Amazon Prime has free streaming music, so I put it up on there, and it puts the lyrics up. And it must be said that I'm assuming they were marketing this to teenagers and preteens, and the lyrics are kind of cheeky.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, one of the songs is called Red Light Special.
Yeah, so it's sort of a little bit edgy. So I can see why maybe a young person of that ilk might want to get the TLC album, because they're being a little cheeky with their lyrics. Again, 90s sound effects. What was that all about?
Apparently it's an ongoing thing for you, Tim, the 90s sound effects, which I guess because I grew up on it, I never even thought about it. I'm like, sound effects? I don't even hear. I'm like, now I'm going to go back and hear a kazoo in the background of a song I didn't even know.
Yeah, it's just weird, like, little sound effect things. And so who was the breakout star of TLC? Did they have a breakout star?
They didn't have a breakout star. They stayed together. And then was it Chili who passed away? One of them got in a car accident and died. And then I think they all just kind of moved on. Nobody was really, because there's Left Eye, there's Chili. What is the other one's name? Oh God, any other time? Sorry if you're yelling at me, Phil. Any other time I would know that.
I take it Left Eye wasn't that person's given name at birth.
No. So their names at birth were, there's Lisa Lopez, Rolanda Thomas, Crystal Jones, and Tiana Watkins. It's another band where it started out with a different person, and she kind of just disappeared.
Okay.
But it's, yeah. So T-Boz, Left Eye, and then Chili. Those were the names they went by, but the real names were Rhonda, Chili Thomas, Tiana T-Boss Watkins, and Left Eye Lopez. And was it Left Eye who passed away, or was it Chili? I can't remember. One of them passed away in a car accident, and then they kind of like disappeared.
Yeah, I mean, also I feel that listening to them on this, I didn't feel any of them had particularly strong voices.
What they did well together. I can agree with that.
Yeah, but I mean, they're like the Spice Girls. Often, they take a line each, and they weren't necessarily Aretha Franklin, but it was fine. This, you listen to it, and to me, the voices sound weak.
Well, truthfully, if we're going to talk the Spice Girls, Sporty, best singer of all the Spice Girls, period, best voice. She was a very strong singer, followed very shortly by probably Scary Spice and maybe Eva Button.
Yeah.
So, yes, there were some very standout singers in the Spice Girls, but y'all don't believe me, but go back and listen. When they do harmonize, Posh has beautiful, beautiful tone to her alto voice, whether nobody wants to give her props for it or not. And if she hadn't been there on the times they do some harmony, that would not have worked. You got to have those voices, too. Got to have those voices, too.
Exactly. But I will say one other thing about this TLC. So... well, the other thing that I noticed is that every track, I don't think Waterfalls does it, but all the other tracks always breaks into some kind of rap thing.
Yeah.
And it's probably MC someone, whatever, but it's like you can't go a track without some rapping bit in it.
See, and I'm just so used to it, I guess it doesn't even dawn on me. I was like, I don't know what Tip's going to think of this one. Oh, and that was the other thing about TLC. When you're asking if anybody was a breakout star, I think they went bankrupt.
Oh.
Pretty sure like members of TLC went bankrupt or something.
I can give you a TLC encounter fun fact from me.
What's that?
The very first time I went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, which was probably 2006, 2007, something like that, they rotate their exhibits through there, and they have like various costumes and instruments and things like that. They had the TLC costumes that have the belt buckle that lights up. And they had those in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and they had them rigged up so they flashed or did whatever they did in the video.
Yeah, in their videos, they wore very eccentric outfits, and they all kind of matched, but they were different. And they had like belt buckles that like had like a circle, and they like lit up. I think Left Eye wore those because of the eye thing. Yeah,
so I have seen TLC memorabilia stuff with my own fair eyes.
So it all comes full circle.
There you go.
All right. We'll end it with our last album, which was a completely random, and I don't know where this came from because no one should have to listen to 28 songs from George Michael. Was it a really long album?
Well, this album was not a chore at all because I know. When I had my original CD collection before I sold it in the early 2000s, I had this in a twin CD, what they call a Fat Boy box, which is the double CD box. So I had this, and I was super familiar with it. I mean, George Michael, as we've probably discussed before, is, it's hard to say he is. He'd say was because he died. It's terrible. I know. I'm going to say is. George Michael is a fabulous singer, performer, singer, songwriter, etc., etc. The interesting thing about this album, do you know why it's called Ladies and Gentlemen?
No.
So he was going through a particular dark period of his life, and he was hanging out in public toilets to meet other guys, and then he got busted by a cop, and it was a whole thing. He was going through a rough time. It's a dark time for George Michael. So he called this album "Ladies and Gentlemen," speaking of being busted in a public lavatory.
Okay, that makes sense. So I love George Michael. I was just making a joke because it is a really long album, though, guys. It's not a joke. It's a long album. But I mean, I love everything on it. I mean, you've got Careless Whisper, Freedom 90, Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me. And the version I have has the Elton John comes in. And I can't hear that song without going, Mr. Elton John.
John, yeah.
She walks in and then everybody's like, whoa. And then he starts singing. That's what I hear when I hear that song. Father Figure, which, okay. Now, we are very well known that George Michael was gay. I'm just going to say it. He was gay. It's known. I have no issue with that. But in the video, he did what a lot of people who are gay did. He had a female in the video with him for father figure, right?
Mm-hmm.
The video and the song now as a full-grown adult are kind of creepy to me. There's a grooming factor to it that I don't like.
I think you can look at a lot of pop videos from back in the day and look at them with fresh 2021 eyes and decide that that's probably not cool and or appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, there's the most famous, what is it with Michael Jackson when he's following the girl in the video and she's like trying to get away from him and he keeps following her. What song is that, Tim?
What, Thriller?
No.
Liberian Girl?
She's wearing like a short dress and they're in the alleyway.
Oh, The Way You Make Me Feel.
Yeah, that's kind of creepy now as a full grown adult. When I hear that song, I like the song, but then when I put the video and the song together, I'm like, man, maybe that's, I don't know. Cause I was watching, when I was listening to this, I had YouTube up and the video was playing. And, you know, the let me be your father figure statements in the song mixed with the way the video was set up. I was like, this is kind of creepy as an adult. Yeah, I don't know why I never noticed.
Yeah, it wasn't cool at the time, but it's still maybe a statement of the day. People are more aware of things like that now.
Yeah, I mean, and that's nothing against him. I love George Michael. It was just an observation I had while listening back to this album.
But I mean, it does have an absolute cavalcade of hits. I mean,
oh yeah,
I Knew You Were Waiting for Me, Aretha Franklin and George Michael. I mean, that is fantastic. Yeah. It's got Star People on there, Freedom 90, Too Funky, Fast Love, Different Corner, Praying for Time. I mean, this is, you know, a catalog of hits.
Yeah, if you have never experienced George Michael and you want to get just a little bit of everything from him, go listen to this album. It'll hit all the boxes. It's a great album. I've listened to it from A to B a million times, which is weird considering I was kind of young when it came out. Might explain to you why I can listen to all the things that I do, but I absolutely adore George Michael. I dressed up as him in the Faith video for Halloween a few years back. Earrings, jacket, and all.
I can give you a rock and roll fact about Faith.
What's that?
So, you know the guitar line, chang. That's played by a session guitar player called Hugh Byrne, who was the same guy who played the guitar solo on Jerry Rafferty's Baker Street.
Huh. I did not know that.
He's a session guitar player that's played on hundreds and hundreds of hits. Anyhow, I was in Chandler Guitars in Kew, which is a guitar shop I used to go into, which is long since closed. Okay. And I was waiting to buy something, and there's this little short guy was in front of me buying guitar strings or a guitar lead or something, and he went out. And the guy said, "Do you know who that was?" I said, "No." He said, "That's Hugh Byrne." I said, "Really?" So there he was. We was standing next to each other.
Once again, Tim, they just walk right by you and you'll never know. Second story that's happened to you. So one other thing about George Michael, me and Tim talked about this. I don't think it was on the podcast, just in general. So, depending on how you feel about James Corden, the night show host, doesn't really matter, but he does the carpool karaoke's. Well, the original idea for carpool karaoke was in 2011 when George Michael joined James Corden on a BBC comic relief sketch. There's the comic relief thing again, Tim. It all comes full circle. And he says James Corden was really excited. He loves, George Michael, all these things. But the idea for carpool karaoke came from that skit.
Well, there you go.
I don't think they sing in it, though, so I'm a little confused about how that works. But that's what James Corden says. And
in the comic relief skit, was he driving or was his car being towed like it is in carpool karaoke?
Well, considering he's staring at George Michael to the passenger seat, I really hope it was being towed. So, if you watch it, he's straight staring in the distance right at George Michael, because if he was driving, we would all be in trouble.
There we go.
So, yeah, but it was on the Late Late Show. And yeah, there you go. If you guys haven't seen it, I'll put it in the group when we get out of here. There's the YouTube video of it. But George Michael has influenced us all forever. And if you don't know anything about him, go listen to that album. It'll teach you what you need to know. Amazing singer, amazing writer, all the things.
Exactly. In one package, everything you need in the world of George Michael, all in one thing.
this episode. If you're feeling aggressive and you just want to yell things, go listen to the Bikini Kill album. If you want to learn about George Michael, go listen to that album. And if you just want a thing of what sounds like disco music, but it's actually 90s pop music from the 90s, go listen to the Spice Girls. And if you just want a wide variety of all random but off branch, because they're not quite the hits, go listen to Sabrina.
And with that, those wise words from Joy, we will wrap it up. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.